So I'm really excited about this next Fireside Chat. For those of you who were here last year and saw Ann Mack interview Guy Kawasaki, that was such a highlight of the event and such a great, fun dialogue that unearthed a lot of interesting nuggets. And this year, Ann has agreed to come back. She's no longer with her previous job, but she's with Facebook now and following global trends. And she's going to be sitting down and talking with Sarah Granger, who is a digital expert and has written a great book called The Digital Mystique, which I have read and is excellent, and I think is for sale. So another good thing to take on the plane. So let's welcome to the stage Ann Mack and Sarah Granger. One last reminder, if you're a mentee in speed mentoring, you need to report down to the FaceTime lounge. Thank you.
And will I know when the session is the timer going to appear?
Yeah, see how it's counting down?
Okay, anyway, oh, there it is. I couldn't see it in these chairs. They're so comfortable. Hi, everyone. My name is Ann Mack, and I oversee global content in our Global Consumer Insights group at Facebook. It's known as Facebook IQ. And Sarah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Sarah Granger. I've been in high tech for a long time and just wrote a book that came out in September called The Digital Mystique, How the Culture of Connectivity Can Enhance Your Life, essentially. That's the short version.
I found it really interesting in reading your book because you were a girl who coded before Girls Who Code. So I thought it would be interesting for this audience to kind of delve into your background and how you got involved in technology and how that's been a through line through your entire career.
Well, I got online at age 9, which of course now is like, how could kids possibly stay away from technology that long? But that was 1982, and the Apple II Plus came out, and then I started taking programming classes just because it interested me and I wanted to learn more about technology, and just this fascination of technology just kept me fascinated. There were so many new things to learn, and that's what really has kept me in it all of these years, because it's just, I think it's so amazing, all of the things that we can do for our lives and our work.
For sure. I mean, my first experience with a computer was a Texas Instruments, very clunky machine. And I remember writing 900 lines of code to have a simple stick figure walk across the screen. Unlike you, it was almost like predestined for you to get into technology, whereas for me, I kind of fell into it. You know, I was a journalist, and when I moved to New York, I joined Adweek, covering the interactive sector at a very heady time. It was 2000, so I saw the first .com boom, bust, and build back up. And then I joined J. Walter Thompson in a corporate communications capacity, and shortly thereafter moved over to a trends role. And when you're talking about trends, it's hard not to talk about technology, because technology tends to be a driver at the center of many of the trends that we spotlighted. And then obviously I moved on to Facebook, and that's at the center of technology, and that's helping to drive what the future is going to look like. So I was really compelled when I saw the title of your book, The Digital Mystique, because everyone who's ever taken a gender studies class in college has read The Feminine Mystique and remembers how empowering it was. And in the foreword to your book, Elsa Camart-Page of Blogger writes, "Inspired and empowered by that book, my mom entered the workforce and forged an entirely new path for herself, becoming my role model in the process." So her mom was on the forefront of a cultural revolution, and that was second wave feminism. And I'm guessing your book gets at another cultural movement, and that's the digital revolution. So do you want to talk a little bit about like the background behind the title of the book and why you called it what you did?
Sure, yeah. So the book went through a few different iterations, as projects tend to do. And it began as a book about our digital lives. And that's still what it is, but as I started writing about digital life, I realized there was so much more that we could be saying about. It's not just how email can be helpful or how Facebook can be helpful, but it's also how we can use these things to be empowered. I mean, it is about empowerment. And I thought, well, there is so much mystery and fear surrounding the internet and technology, social media, that keeps people from really engaging on the level that they could, that would benefit them. And so that's where I drew from the title, and also, of course, it was a play on the feminine mystique. But it really has been about all that you can do for, and dispelling the myths about technology, because there's so much negativity out there right now, especially there's so many books and articles saying, oh, technology is going to run your life, your cell phone's going to fry your brain, your kids are going to be completely unable to do anything on their own, but that's not the experience that I've had at all, so I wanted to impart some of my knowledge of 30 years of being online since age 9 till now.
And one of the anecdotes that you share, and you share many in the book, and some of them are very touching, and others you kind of laugh at because you've been in that person's shoes before. But this one was particularly heartwarming. It was about your friend Roxanne, and it shows the power of sharing and reaching out to your networks. Do you want to relate to that to the audience?
Sure. Well, Roxanne's story was she had a lung disease of some sort. I don't remember if she disclosed specifically what it was, but she couldn't figure out what was happening to her, and she had been to several doctors, and she finally just said, you know, to hell with it, I'm going to just put it out on Facebook. I'm going to crowdsource this health problem, and it worked. One of her friends, who was a physician, came back and said, you know, I think I know what's wrong with you, and she was able to get her problem solved and get treated and feel better, and now she has a very fulfilling life, where she was told that she might die, you know, and so, and these are just, and the thing about social media is there are so many examples like this. There are so many stories out there. I had to, out of all of the hundreds of people I talked to get stories for my book, you know, everyone has some sort of story about how digital media has helped them in their lives, and it's just, it's really fascinating and motivating, and that's, I think, why it's so important for us all to build these communities and help each other out.
I agree. We have a page at Facebook, and there's an external facing page called Facebook Stories, and there are several stories like the one that you just told about Roxanne. One of the most recent ones is brother and sister who were separated in their early years, were reunited decades later. Another one was a story of a man who had put some cryptic messages on his Facebook page, and he was really in need of help, and so many people reached out to him during this time of distress. And they are moving, and they show the power of sharing, and that sharing is caring. And you talk about this notion of reciprocity in your book, which I really love, because it talks about the more you share, the more people will share in turn, and your life will get exponentially better because of it.
Definitely.
So authenticity, we're all about authenticity. This is a word that's kind of been used, abused, bastardized over the years. So I would love to get what your definition of authenticity is and how we can apply that in our day-to-day, both on and offline.
Sure. Well, I was in this session earlier about social media and self-confidence gap, and I think that this sort of relates back to that. And there is a challenge with authenticity. I mean, we all want to present ourselves as who we are, but yet there's this difficult challenge of, I don't want to put too much of myself out there, but I don't want to be withholding either. And so you have to first get comfortable in your own skin online. You have to figure out, okay, well, how comfortable am I sharing this kind of personal information? How comfortable am I talking about my work? And then experiment. And I think that if you start with a small audience of people, then you can get used to it, and then you can be out there blogging, tweeting, video chatting, doing all of these things, and and building a bigger network of support, and because you're sharing your authentic self, your true self. And that's not an easy thing. I mean, it's totally overused, but it's so important. It really is the key to finding your place. And it makes
it's almost like a point of vulnerability, though.
Yes,
because you are, you know, in this process of sharing your voice, or even finding your voice if you haven't necessarily found it yet. But sometimes you have to go through that process in order to get there, to get to your authentic self.
Right. Well, and you have to start small. You can't just assume, all right, I'm going to go out there and try and share my whole life story to millions of people. And it just doesn't work that way. But that's the beauty of it, is in most cases we are starting small and then we get comfortable as we move along.
So we both know, and we've been covering this for a while, how communications is shifting. There's this new visual language that is surfacing that's made up of emojis, emoticons, photos, and videos, and it's largely supplanting the need for text. And you talk about this in your book, about how words can only go so far. Sometimes you need a visual to help really express how you're feeling. Can you talk a little bit about that shift and where you've seen it play out?
Well, that's one that I learned the hard way. You know, I started dating online back when I was in high school, and trying to figure out how to communicate with someone you're dating, of course, is very scary. But then if you have to do it through text, and back then we didn't have emojis, it was just like using ASCII text to come up with these little images. And so that was my on-the-job training for using visuals. But in my book, I talk about, you know, how you can use it in all kinds of relationships, and it really allows you to, whether it's emoticons or little acronyms or sharing videos or photos. I mean, a lot of people just share photos now, and that's their emoji. They just share a photo, like, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I'm doing. But it really is true. I mean, the old adage, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and we can't rely on text for our most important communications. And we still, as wonderful as social media is for so many things, if there's something important, you know, pick up the phone, go meet someone in person. And I'm not going to say that social media is the end-all be-all for everything.
And it's shifting not only to photos, but also videos, because technology is now allowing this for us to just point, shoot, and upload. And you saw this with the Ice Bucket Challenge, for instance, yes, with millions of people worldwide participating and everybody wanting to get involved, which is so powerful. And that could only be conveyed through a vehicle like video. So speaking of technology, mobile is obviously the future, and the future is here, it's now. You know, we recently conducted a piece of research at Facebook into the lives of teens and young adults across 13 different markets, and these are people who've grown up with mobile at their disposal over the course of their lifetime. They've seen the mobile device evolve from a simple texting and talking device into an everything hub for music listening, video watching, game playing, socializing, navigating, researching, buying, and more. And eventually it will become, you know, our health hub, our personal assistant, our wallet. So there are huge shifts happening. Can you talk about what you foresee in the future for mobile?
Well, I think mobile has immense opportunities, and it's really been fascinating for me to see the shift even just over the last 10 years. What we can do now, I mean, I order my dinner online, I check my bank account, you know, everything you can imagine. And the kids, they're now learning in school online, mobile, iPads, everything. So I think that what we're going to see is all kinds of wearable devices, watches, phones, headsets, and that's going to be, it's all going to be integrated. Everything's going to be integrated. We're going to be integrating the social media, we're going to be integrating the apps, integrating the devices, and then the Internet of Things also. It's all going to be put together, and we're going to see this massive collaboration. And we're also getting into the embedded devices too, and people who are willing and interested in having these things physically attached to them will be doing that. So it'll be interesting, but I think we're also at a very, we're at the infancy of those kinds of things, so we'll be testing out a lot of new technologies in that respect for the health side, and it'll fascinating though.
It's truly fascinating, and for an audience like this, I think it opens up a well of creative opportunities. You know, we're still figuring out what good creativity looks like on a mobile phone. So, you know, if you think about being on Facebook, for instance, and you're scrolling through, what is going to make a person stop and watch? If it is a video and someone's watching it with the sound off, what does that look like? So we're creating these new creative constructs through the vehicles with which people are now communicating and connecting. So wearables opens up a whole new conversation about how brands can incorporate themselves in a way that doesn't seem intrusive, that actually helps augment or enhance the experience. Speaking of wearables, you do talk about digital etiquette a little bit in your book, and if you think about you know, smart glasses, smartwatches, technology on your body, sometimes people can be rude because they're checking things simultaneously to trying to carry on a conversation with you. So if you had advice to give for people who are trying to exercise some restraint in their digital habits while being face-to-face rather than face-to-screen, what would you suggest?
Well, the face-to-face is an interesting one, because I think that part of it's generational. Some people definitely think it's completely rude to even look at your phone when you're having a conversation. But they're just general. I really believe in sort of traditional standard etiquette. If you think about what's polite and how you would be treated, then just put yourself in the other person's shoes and treat them that way with respect. It's funny how people will just start like doing this thing. I thought about bringing my phone up today, and I said, no, I'm not going to bring it. I'm not going to bring it. And you know, you're like, well, what are they doing? Why are they? You know, we're having a conversation, and one of the people in my family, who will remain nameless, does this all the time, and I'm like, why do you do this? Oh, well, he says, I'm just trying to, you know, help out with the conversation. I'm looking up what we're talking about. Well, why don't you just tell us you're looking up what you're talking about? So I think that we need to just get to that point where people explain what they're doing, because not everyone is clairvoyant. They can't tell when you start looking at your device that you're still participating in the conversation. And like looking around this room, many of you are actually looking at us, which is wonderful, because how many conferences you go to when everybody's just on their computer? So it's so nice to be able to have that engagement, and but it's a shifting area, and we're going to have to be careful about that. We're going to have to think about our etiquette and not just fall into these habits, because it's so easy, and it's a crutch. It's a crutch that everyone uses. If you're at a party, I don't know who to talk to, I'm going to look at my phone. So, you know, we're making progress slowly, I think.
What was the figure earlier today that Todd used? 66 hours dedicated to email. Is that per year? So it shows you how that constant pinging in your life can be all-consuming, and some people choose to like go in the complete opposite direction and do digital detoxes or deteching vacations, where they log off completely in order to be in the offline now and to be really, really present. And there's definitely a mindfulness movement running through Silicon Valley, because people understand that in order to reignite their creativity, sometimes they need to step away from the screen.
Absolutely. Well, when I was writing this book, I had to force myself to stop and take walks just to get my brain moving. You know, it's the kind of thing that anyone has to do when they're working on a big project. But I do think that it is important to step away when you need to step away. And email is the bane of my existence, and I've created a very regimented way of dealing with it and triaging what I have to deal with so that I don't just get sucked in for hours at a time. But I think you can create an internal barometer and you can listen to, okay, well, how is this making me feel? If I'm reading a bunch of negative news stories for the last 30 minutes and I'm now in a bad mood, maybe it's time to put the phone down, close the laptop, move away, go outside, look out the window, you know, feel better. And we're now reading all this research about the dopamine response and how social media affects our emotions and our physiology and our physical side and our physical health. So now that we're beginning to notice and pay attention to what's happening to us, I think it really, we can now make more conscious effort and say, okay, it's time for me to disconnect. One of the examples in my book, Tiffany Schlein, she has a great video about how she takes a Shabbat, technology Shabbat once a week. On Saturday, she spends 24 hours totally offline with her family, and that works for them. Everybody has something different that, you know, a different style. For me, I just step away when I need to step away, but that's what works for her, and I highly recommend that people find out what fits for them so they don't just get overwhelmed completely.
I find that my best ideas come when I'm on the mat, when I'm doing yoga, because no devices are nearby. I just have to focus on my breath, and then I walk out of that yoga room and I'm like, wow, why didn't I do this sooner? Why did I sit in front of my computer hoping for a solution to come? And I'm sure all of us are like this to a degree. Let's talk gender. Let's talk diversity. So, you know, earlier this year, technology companies came out with their diversity numbers, and I'm going to quote a column in the New York Times. After years of playing down the problem, tech companies like Google, Facebook, and Apple now say they're serious about improving the gender and ethnic diversity of their workforces and corporate boards. Recent data from those companies and others like them confirm what everyone has long known. Most of their employees are white and Asian men. Among technical employees, fewer women and even fewer are Latino or African American. I was sitting in on a panel earlier today, and Lynn Powers of my former employer, JWT, she said diversity is a business imperative, and I would say that across the board. So what's happening in technology is also happening in advertising, and it's not only diversity in terms of ethnic or gender makeup, it's also diversity in terms of thought, because you want different points of view in the room. So you've been a woman in technology for pretty much your entire career. How have you handled it? Where have you seen it? And how have you responded?
Where to begin? We need wine for this one. So, you know, it's funny because, you know, you talk about reading the Feminine Mystique in college. I didn't read the Feminine Mystique in college. I was trying to wade through C programming and satellite design class and things like that. And so for me, feminism was something that happened to me organically. And I knew that I was different because, well, when you look around the room and you're the only woman there, that's kind of obvious. But it took my own experiences to really realize, okay, these things are true. And as much as the technology companies can try and shove it under the rug, it happens. It happens to every woman, I think, that I've ever talked to in technology. And some of it is overt and some of it is subtle. And I think more of it is subtle in Silicon Valley that I've dealt with. But over time, I've just learned certain techniques for putting up with it. And sometimes I just don't. And if I'll go to an event with my husband, for example, it is very, I've started avoiding holiday parties because I will be treated as just like as my friend was calling it, the jewelry, you know. Oh. And there was a party. I have a background in computer security. This was a couple years ago. A man was telling my husband about his computer security startup. And I had tons of contacts I could have introduced him to. He didn't look at me once, didn't ask me what I do, so I said nothing, and he went away and didn't, you know, I could have probably helped him with his company, but that's his loss. That was my choice that day. That's how I decided to respond in that case, because you know, sometimes you call people on it, sometimes you don't, but it is a problem, but I'm really feeling better about it now than I used to, because people are talking about it, people are writing about it, people are sharing their stories, and that's the best thing that we can do, because the men don't realize that they're doing it. I mean, oftentimes there's no one purposefully being sexist. It's just that's what they're used to. And so the more that we can educate them, I mean, this is a phenomenal conference, and what you've been able to do here is amazing and increasing the diversity, and we just have to keep doing it. And I wish technology were a little more friendly. I wish there wasn't so much pushback. I wish there was a lot more camaraderie and collaboration on this subject, because there's still a lot of defensiveness, and that bothers me.
And some of it actually starts really early on, and many companies are trying to address the problem, ours in particular, getting to the root of the problem, which is defined as unequal access to skills and trainings that put a career in technology within reach. So, you know, we're partnering with Yes We Code, which is a nonprofit that aims to teach coding to 100,000 youth from low opportunity backgrounds. And you talk about this in your book as well, changing the ratio in technology through Girls Who Code, Coding Academy, coding camps. You have a daughter, correct?
Yes.
So do you advocate this for your daughter and her friends, or is it too early?
Oh, no, it's not too early. She's going to be 9 soon. She's the same age that I was when I started coding. So, no, we actually just signed her up for a coding camp for a weekend event with a friend in a couple weeks, so that's going to be fun, but only because she wanted to do it. And I think the interesting problem that we're facing now is that there's so much of this coding is cool, which it is, but bringing it in a way that kids want to learn it and get excited about it, because part of my problem was I was really excited about it, and I took some great classes and learned very well on my own, but then I got to college and the courses were not fun, and they weren't encouraging, they weren't nurturing, they were just, here, write this project, turn it in next week. There was no fun in that. And so I think making it interesting and why it's fascinating. Here you can build this thing, you can create this, and it started out as nothing, and here you made this beautiful thing, you made a game or whatever. And I think teaching anyone who wants to learn about technology needs to see why, rather than just, you should learn to code, because that doesn't help. And the other thing that I think is missing that no one is talking about is just general information technology and hardware and software training. When we were kids, you know, I could take apart the computer and say, this is the modem, this is the microprocessor, this is the RAM, and now you look at your phone, like, you can't tell what's inside of it or how it works, and this is a very powerful computer that you've got in the palm of your hand. And so I think that we need to incorporate that education so people can really understand, especially kids, the sort of maker side of computing. Like, how does it work? How does it, you know, where does it plug in? The same way we do with the electronics circuits, and, you know, you plug the wire into the battery and then the light bulb, you know, you can do that. And like little bits is a really exciting thing. And some of these new tools for kids that they're building, I think, is really helpful in that respect.
So really getting hands-on.
Yes.
Another point that you make in the book is that all of this information that we're uploading to the cybersphere about ourselves actually can be framed in a very positive way, because it will allow marketers and companies to really personalize your experience. And, you know, in the future, I believe that there will be this thing called predictive personalization, and it's already happening to a degree where companies will be able to predict what you'll need or want based on your past behaviors or expressions, and be able to serve that up to you before you even know you want or need it. So can you talk about some of the things that you're seeing now in the realm of personalization and where you see that evolving?
Sure. Well, this has been something that's been in the works for several years, of course, and Facebook is one of the places where most people will see it. They're like, okay, well, I was just looking up polar bears, and suddenly there's an ad for a polar bear t-shirt, right? And I think we're also at a place where that makes people nervous because they don't realize that it's not just there to suck away there. We get a lot of privacy articles, and we get a lot of news media on your data's being mined, your kids, all of their information is out there for the government, for the companies, everyone's taking it and using it, but in most cases, the information is being held in an independent way, and it's being used for a very specific purpose. And most companies, frankly, don't have the time or the interest to go look at it and do more with it. Google may be the exception because they're really trying to organize the world's information, and that's their mission. But it is very crucial that we look at it as something that's there to benefit the consumer, and for people working on that side, figure out how that you can communicate this message to people so that they realize that it's something that's for their benefit and their safety, and make it easy for them to opt in or opt out with certain types of information, because I think that we will be getting into a lot more privacy conversations in the coming years. And I like what Facebook's doing. I know Yahoo has been putting a lot of effort into the personalization also. And really, I think every company is looking at it, that every technology company, social media company, and trying to figure out how to make that work. Twitter, the latest, really, honing in on their ads, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but it's all a matter of experimenting.
And it becomes a part of a much larger conversation about digital permanence.
Yes.
We are leaving these digital footprints behind, and some are online even before birth, with parents posting pictures in vitro. I was at a session at South by Southwest last year, and I think it was Jerry Cohen of Google who said there should be a smile, burp, or a giggle test. They should be able to do that before any pictures of them are posted online. Another panelist noted that parents need to have this digital permanence conversation with their kids before they even have the birds and the bees conversation with them.
That's true.
You also talk about your digital footprint, not yours in particular, but everyone's digital footprint, and how we have to be cognizant of it and manage it, not only backwards but forwards. Can you get into that a little bit?
Sure. Well, in terms of our kids, I think it's important to just think about how you want to share about their lives from the get-go, and also think about the vast amount of information that we have out there in the first place. I mean, I really appreciate my friends' baby pictures, but I don't need to see 12 of them every day, right? So, the same kid. So, I think the key is curation. And I mean, think about it. This is one of the things I was really putting some thought into when working on the book, was just our photos. I take more photos in a week than I used to take in a year. And what do we do with all of this? And how do we organize it and manage it? And what are our kids going to do with all of that? No, they're not going to have time to look. I don't even have time to go through the slides that my parents took, right? So we have to start thinking about it and sort of the long term, like, what do we really need to be able to hold on to of our lives, and find ways to keep that information, organize it, and present it to other people, and figure out who we want to share it with. Like my daughter, I hardly ever put any photos of her on public posts, and that's a very conscious choice. But then as individuals ourselves, we also have to figure out what we want to present, and so I talk about your own digital life and your digital identity, and that's another part of the book, and just how to present yourself personally and professionally, and what you want to share and what you don't want to share. And the sooner that you can figure that out, the better, because then you're not sitting there late, 10 years down the road going, oh my gosh, I can't believe I put that photo online and it went viral, and what was I thinking? And so if we can just take a step back at the beginning and make some decisions on what we will and won't post from the get-go, then we won't have to be cleaning up after ourselves later on. It's difficult.
Well, it's interesting because you see employers and admissions officers using social media to vet potential students and candidates. So it is very interesting when you look at young people's digital footprint that they're leaving behind. And there are some laws about the right to forget. But at the end of the day, you talk about what is your professional self versus your personal self, but those lines blur so quickly, especially in the digital world, because everything is so accessible. So in my mind, what you're sharing personally, you should be okay with sharing professionally as well, because it's hard to make that distinction because there's definitely a blur, especially in this industry, as I'm sure many of you can attest. Just before we open it up to questions, I want to read a quote from your book, which I kind of love. As technology continues to play a greater role in our lives, we have more and more opportunities to reach out and help others online and to make our own lives more meaningful in the process. And that kind of gets back to this whole notion of paying it forward online. Do you want to get into that just a little bit before we open it up to the floor?
Well, my experience with social media and the digital world has been, in general, very positive. And the point about the book was to educate people so that they know that there are so many opportunities for them in all the different aspects of their lives, and it's not just about sharing what I had for breakfast today. It's not just, oh, here my kid won an award at school. You know, it's all about building these communities and supporting each other and all of the things that we can give to each other. And really, I have personally found that the more you give, the more you get back. It's just like volunteering. It's the same sort of feeling you get from sharing. And if you put yourself out there and you are authentic, and then it comes back in spades, and that really is the experience that I know a lot of bloggers have and anyone who spends a lot of time building these networks. And so I recommend thinking about that, and as you move forward in your career and in your life and with the other people in your lives.
It's almost karmic.
It is, yeah.
Okay, questions from the floor? Yes.
This might be what we fondly call a quament, which is like a comment and a question. But I found it really interesting. Last year I was talking to someone who was kind of commiserating with me that she was trying to have her younger employees understand why you have to be careful in engaging in the social space. But then I found she didn't speak social, so she couldn't understand why it was so intriguing to them. So I had to kind of give her a little social 101. And when I told her to think of it as like the internet is forever, that's when it like resonated with her as a way to like open that dialogue with these millennials about why you should think about before posting, not like finger wagging, but like really think about it. So there's my comment.
At Facebook, we're friends with everybody we work with, obviously. But there's a saying that your personal life is your professional life, your professional life is your personal, like, who you are in your personal life should be who you are in your professional life, and vice versa. Like, you shouldn't be like, I am work Ann now, and now I'm social Ann, and now I'm weekend Ann. No, you are your person, and this is kind of going back to your authentic self. Like, if you are your authentic self, you should be that same person in every facet of your life. And sometimes it takes a while to find your authentic self, and that's where sometimes the missteps happen on social media. But you're right, this is kind of a permanent record. So yes, you can go back and erase things, but you should, think about it. If your mom was to see it, or if your boss was to see it, would you be okay with that?
Yeah. Well, there are layers too.
Yep.
There are layers to it. I mean, it's a lot of it is common sense. Like, you're not going to tell certain people you know, what you're doing for dinner, because it's not, I'm not gonna post where I am with my kid all the time on my public Twitter feed, right? But it doesn't mean that I'm being inauthentic. That's just none of their business. So, but then with my friends, I'm happily gonna share. We had a great meal, you know, down the street at this restaurant or whatever. We had a lot of fun. Here's a good picture, that sort of thing.
Hi, my name's Jessica. I work for the Representation Project, and I think that social media and the internet can be a tremendously empowering place, especially for women, but I've been stunned, especially with Gamergate and what happened to Anita Sarkeesian online, at the toxic misogyny that you can find on what I call the space between the refrigerator and the wall of humanity, which is usually YouTube comments, but sort of what you can, how do we take that space back? How do we shine the light on that space and send those little trolls away so it can be that empowering place, particularly for young women? Because right now, I want to tell the young women in my life to stay away from, because I see what can be said to them.
It's very frustrating, and it's sad that we have to deal with that, because really, you know, I'll write the same thing that a man writes, and 90% of my comments will be sexist personal attacks, and 90% of their comments will be substantive about the topic. So this is a very frustrating place to be. And I definitely addressed it in the book, because you can't talk about gender and the digital world without it. I think, and this is just my personal feeling, but I want to see more conversation about this. I think the companies need to do a better job. I think they need to step up. From a technical level, we've had the tools for a decade for better comment moderation, better troll takedowns. I mean, it's not that difficult to do. The Huffington Post, for example, is one place they do a very good job of dealing with it. And so if the social media companies will take those examples, the positive ones, and employ them, then I think that we could get rid of a huge majority of the trolls just automated. I really think that's true. And then the rest of them, if we take a more active role in policing and allowing people to report without as much of the, it becomes a, you hear all these stories where it's like, oh, I tried to report this and I couldn't, and they wouldn't take this guy down, and it took me like days, and I had to deal with it, and then all of this backlash. And so we have to be quicker about our responses to these sort of things. And it's not an easy problem to solve. I'm just saying it's doable. And I think that people need to demand it, women need to demand it, and say that this is ridiculous, we're fed up, we're tired of being treated this way. It's not just a computer. This makes me feel terrible when I read these things that people say. It's not, and back to the etiquette point, I think a lot of the problem is that people get in the habit of saying things online that they would never say to someone's face. And you can't do that. And that's the filter. You should always, before you say anything online, say, would I say this to the person's face?
Hi, thank you so much, Sarah and Anne. My name is Holly from Green Rising Marketing, and I wanted to comment about, or wanted to ask you a little bit more about the photos, and I really appreciated that you brought that up, because I think that one of the men that had spoken today or yesterday said that his rock bottom point was when he went up the mountain in Peru and realized he didn't remember the sunrise without looking at the photos on his phone. And last year I took, one of my New Year's resolutions was to take less photos. And so now what I do every year is I do my New Year's resolutions, I eat my black eyed peas, and then I make a commitment to go through all the year's photos, put them in a book, and it really culls out the number of photos you take when you have to go through them every year. And I wanted to hear a little bit more about the research on the dopamine response, because I haven't seen the biological evidence in reports, just all anecdotal about how it makes you feel. Can you speak on that?
Sure. Well, I mean, I can't cite offhand what the sources are, but essentially what has been discovered is that your brain gets a mini dopamine response every time you get a like or a comment, and it's the same kind of thing that you can get from some drugs, just on a very low level. And so what happens is we start getting, and this is where the social media addiction comes into play. And so what, you know, and my disclaimer, I'm not medically trained, whatever, but I know social media. And people do, we get in this habit. It's so easy to check your phone, check your phone, check your phone, and it becomes a physical habit. And then when you get this dopamine response, you just want to do it more and more. And so that's really just the basis of where it comes from, is that people are becoming, even the psychologists are actually treating people for social media addiction now for this reason. There is an actual diagnosis that some people will get.
Have you seen any correlation to like the, I'm not sure of the technical term, but I guess it's kind of like a manual fixation or something with cigarettes? They would find that if you can occupy your hands when you're trying to quit smoking, that because that dopamine response, every time you'd bring your hand to your mouth would trigger that. Is that something similar?
I think it's similar, but I haven't seen any articles that are specifically relating it to that.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Melanie. So my question is referring to the your work self and your personal self kind of overlapping and merging. I've worked for big companies that have restricted us from posting on social in our uniforms or in the store where we worked, and I've worked for other brands who have promoted or encouraged us rather to post and be ourselves and be a representation of the brand. And I would just ask, what is your opinion on that, and what would you do if you have a big brand? I understand the need to protect the brand from, you know, bad content showing up on social, but do you also want to keep your employees, you know, from kind of hiding?
I think it's good to develop guidelines and training for employees and to be very transparent about the process and talk to everyone. I mean, in some cases you have to have a little bit of a split. I've worked in government, and that is one area in particular. You have to be very careful about what you say and how you say it and who you say it to. But the reason that they're able to do that is because they go through extensive training to figure out what they can and cannot say. And it's the same thing about confidential information. And so if you go through that confidential information training, then you should know what you should and shouldn't be able to say on social media. And then I think that just general social media etiquette is important, and teaching people maybe some of the tools, because a lot of the time these gaffes that companies make or people at these companies make is because they accidentally were in the wrong Twitter feed. I mean, it's so easy on your phone to be in an app or Hootsuite or whatever. Oops, I accidentally tweeted this when I meant to do it on my private account. And so being trained in a way that you always check before you post which account you're using, just getting that as a habit and building that habit. Like one thing I do with Facebook to make sure that I know that I'm posting something private versus public is every time I write a private post, I go back and start a draft for one just for my friends, and then I delete it, because that brings Facebook back to the default setting of just sharing with my friends. So then the next time I go back on Facebook, I don't have to look, okay, am I sending public or just to friends, so that my default is always there. And just being able to train people on these little things, I think, makes a difference. But it is a challenge, and companies need to get on board and realize that keeping people off of social media is really unrealistic at this point. But it also does really fall back to the leadership of the company, because I've worked with a lot of leaders and organizations, and if they don't really get social, you have to educate them, and you have to start slowly and find one person in a leadership position in that company and work with them, and then help them to train the others, so that you can then build the culture of the company that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of the more future-forward companies like Zappos do encourage their employees to be out there and talk about the company. And, you know, obviously our company wants us to be out there, but they instill in us a lot of trust, because working for a technology company, we are privy to conversations that can't go public. So it's a very transparent company, and they expect us to be transparent in our lives, but they put a lot of trust in us, knowing that we won't reveal something, you know, that shouldn't be revealed prematurely. So I think that younger companies, more future-forward companies will understand that millennials and those that come after them, Gen Z, are going to be really active across all of these platforms. So rather than shut them down altogether, they'll empower them to be able to communicate, but also instill in them that trust that, you know, we'll be able to tell you things, but you'll know that some things are not meant to be shared.
Hi there, my name's Jessie. So I have a 14-year-old niece who is obsessed with taking selfies. And I guess, you know, I consider this behavior really vain, like to the extent that like, and I know it's not just her, I look at her friends' Instagrams, they're all doing this. And I often find like, you know, when I'm spending time with her, she's like taking selfies like all the time. And I guess this might be sort of a question on like how to deal with a teenage girl, which maybe one day I'll figure out. But I guess I wanted your opinion on how to deal with that behavior, and like it's so unfamiliar to me, and you know, should we be encouraging that or not? It's sort of, I don't know, it's teenagers.
That's a tough one. There are two schools of thought. One, which is selfies are cool, you should just let them do it, and the other, which is like they're awful, don't do it at all. But the reality, as usual, is it's somewhere in the middle. And I had to have a conversation like that with a young person in our family who was not yet 18 and who was taking selfies that were in tight clothing, and she just needed a little reminder that, yeah, future employers might look at this, and you should consider how other people are going to take this. And oftentimes, what they're doing is just sharing with their friends. It's not on the public feed. It's when it starts to become something that is public that it becomes a problem. And you also have to look at the dynamics of the other kids that they're engaging with and what they're doing, because a lot of the time, this is their way of self-expression. It took me a really long time to understand that they're just trying to express themselves. And I hated selfies, and I still really don't like them that much. But I've come around to understanding why some people will do that. And so it's a matter of just trying to find a happy medium. But I do think that teaching her, like, there is an excess here. You know, there's a point that it's too much, and the curation, just that. What are they supposed to do with that if they take 20 selfies a day for the rest of their lives? How many of these, like, you know, what are you going to do with that? I don't know if it's helpful.
Yeah. Thanks.
I think that's all we have time for. So thank you all for your time and attention today. And thank you, Sarah.